placed his paw on the boy's foot, and the boy, once told he'd never walk again, stood up for the first time in 2 years. No command, no physical support, just a German shepherd once marked for destruction, now breathing life back into the boy who had long given up. Before the fame, before the therapy centers, before the viral silence, they were both just broken. One locked behind steel, the other behind grief. This isn't just a story about healing. It's about remembering who we are when the world forgets. If you're still here, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? What moments stayed with you most? Leave a comment, hit like or subscribe if it feels right. This story has just... The late autumn wind whispered through the chain-link fence as Malik Brown sat motionless on a weathered bench near the edge of the Southgate Canine Rehabilitation Center. The sky was an endless stretch of gray, a reflection of how most of his days had felt over the past 18 months, still, empty, and cold. His hands rested limply on the rubber wheels of his chair, fingers curled inward not from pain but from the quiet numbness that had crept into every part of his life since the accident. At 17, Malik had once been the rising star in Georgia's competitive obedience circuit. A prodigy with an uncanny connection to dogs, he could command with a glance, guide with a whisper. Videos of him at showcases, leading K9s through complicated drills with nothing but subtle gestures, had flooded local social media just a year before. But those were different times before the night his electric bike skidded on black ice and slammed into a parked truck, bore the silence. Since then, he'd spoken to almost no one beyond what necessity demanded. He hadn't touched a leash, hadn't set foot or wheel on a training floor. Malik's mother, Denise, had tried everything. Therapists, support groups, even adaptive sports. None of it broke through the silence. But today was different. Today, she had driven him against his will, mostly to the rehabilitation center run by an old friend of hers. She claimed she just needed to run inside for something, but Malik suspected the truth. This wasn't an errand. This was another intervention. Another attempt to wake him from his endless fog. The air smelled of wet concrete and dog fur. Distant barks echoed off the steel walls of the kennels, some playful, some pained. Malik kept his eyes down, watching a broken leaf cartwheel across the gravel path. He had no plans to go inside. But then, it happened. The barking changed, one voice surged above the rest, not high-pitched or panicked, but guttural, feral. It cracked through the air like a warning shot. Silence. That eerie kind of silence that feels too heavy, too intentional. He looked up, and his eyes locked with the glass wall of one of the side kennels. Inside, a German shepherd stood absolutely still. Its black and tan coat was matted along the ribs, its eyes a storm of wild and wounded. The staff had called it Echo, a name too poetic for a creature they'd nearly written off as untrainable, maybe even dangerous. Echo didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared, unblinking, straight at Malik, as if some invisible wire had connected them across the cold space. And then it lunged, not at the glass, not in rage, but in desperation. Its body slammed against the kennel gate, paws clawing upward, tail stiff as a rod, not barking, not growling, just breathing heavy, like it recognized him, like it had been waiting. From behind his head slightly as a woman in her early 30s with a clipboard approached. Her lanyard reading, "You okay?" she asked, stopping beside him. She followed his gaze. "That's Echo," she added after a pause. "He's complicated." Malik said nothing. Dr. Carr exhaled softly. Most of the dogs here abandoned, abused. They eventually learn to trust someone. Not him. He's different. Doesn't listen, doesn't eat unless it's quiet. Doesn't let anyone near. We were this close to transferring him to the shutdown list. Malik turned toward her slightly at that. She caught the look. "I know," she said, trying to smile. "Not exactly bedtime story stuff, but just now, I've never seen him like that." Echo had stopped thrashing but was still pressed against the glass. His eyes locked on Malik like a war veteran recognizing an old comrade. "I think," Dr. Carr said carefully, "he wants something from you." Malik's hands twitched on the wheels. Not much, but enough to register. Inside the kennel, Echo began to whimper. Not in pain, not fear, but as though pleading. A loop started spinning in Malik's head. A memory? A sound? He couldn't place it. A flash, his first dog, Memphis Echo's coloring was almost identical. Malik had trained him since puppyhood. They'd won their first event together. The connection was unshakable until Memphis was stolen from their yard one summer. Gone without a trace. Dr. Carr was still talking, but Malik was somewhere else entirely. His muscles tightened, a tingling sensation running from his fingertips up through his chest. And then, without deciding to, Malik turned his chair toward the main entrance. Toward the kennel. Toward Echo. Dr. Carr stood back, stunned. She didn't say a word. Inside the glass, the dog began pacing. Slowly, not frantically but rhythmically. Its ears perked. Its body eased into a softer frame. The door buzzed open as Dr. Carr keyed the code. Echo froze again. Malik wheeled himself into the kennel corridor, the other dogs watching silently, as if they too sensed the shift. Dr. Carr opened Echo's gate, but didn't step in. Echo didn't move. Then, with aching slowness, he stepped out, head low, eyes flicking from the cold tile to Malik's eyes, and then sat still, steady, waiting, and Malik blinked. Once, twice, then barely audible he whispered, "Easy boy." Echo laid down completely. Malik hadn't planned to return the next day, but something gnawed at him all night, keeping sleep at bay and his fingers twitching under his blanket like they had something to say. He couldn't explain it, not to his mother, not to himself. There was a quiet gravity pulling him back to the Southgate Center, and against his better judgment, he let it. When he rolled through the side gate at noon, he found Dr. Carr already waiting near the kennel corridor. Clipboard in one hand, a leash in the other. The leash was taut, straining slightly, but not from struggle, more like anticipation. Echo stood beside her, breathing fast, tail still, muscles coiled but not aggressive. Their eyes met again. The same electricity passed between them, more steady this time. "He's been like this since you left yesterday," Carr said without preamble. "Won't eat, won't lie down, just keeps staring at the gate. I figured if I didn't call you, he'd chew through the concrete eventually." Malik gave a tiny nod. Not because he agreed, just because it felt like something had to be acknowledged. They moved into the open exercise yard, a dusty rectangle flanked by worn turf and high steel fencing. No distractions, no other dogs, just space. Carr unclipped the leash, then stepped back. Echo didn't bolt. He didn't pace. He just turned and walked slowly, deliberately toward Malik's chair. There was tension in the air like stretched piano wire. Malik inhaled, steadied his breath, and whispered again, "Easy boy." Echo stopped 2 feet away. His ears twitched. Then, to the shock of every staff member watching behind the glass, he sat, not with submission but recognition. Malik blinked, confusion stirring under the surface of his usually blank stare. This wasn't normal, not for a dog with Echo's history. The trainer muttered behind the glass. Kara didn't answer. She didn't need to. The way Echo leaned slightly forward, alert yet relaxed, said everything. There was a familiarity here, strange, impossible, but undeniable. Over the next hour, Malik remained still while Echo stayed close, circling him once, never touching, never barking, simply present. Carr watched from the sidelines, her brows knit in thought. Malik could feel something building inside him, like an old muscle stretching for the first time in too long. He found himself whispering phrases from another life, old cues, fragments of routines. Heel. Echo didn't flinch, but with each word his breathing slowed, ears perked, body language softened as though decoding a forgotten dialect. When Malik finally rolled forward a few inches and murmured, "With me," Echo stepped into motion like a trained shadow, syncing perfectly, no hesitation. Carr's jaw clenched. What the hell is going on? He dreamed of Memphis, his old dog bounding through a field, eyes blazing with that goofy confidence only Memphis ever had. In the dream, Memphis paused, looked over his shoulder, and standing just behind him was Echo, younger, smaller, mimicking every move. Malik woke up breathless. The next day he arrived early, before the staff shift even changed. The kennel was quiet, morning dew still clinging to the outer fence. Echo saw him from 50 feet away and let out a low chuff, not a bark, not a whine, just a sound that meant, "I know you." Malik wheeled up to the same exercise yard where Carr greeted him with a stack of folders. "I've been pulling his intake documents," she said, trying to piece together where he came from before the raid. She tapped a few pages. He was recovered from a fighting ring outside Augusta. Illegal operation. Most dogs were beyond help. Echo was chained for at least 6 months, likely longer. He attacked 2 handlers, almost had a third. We were days from putting him down before Animal Services rerouted him here. Malik absorbed the words in silence. His eyes flicked to a stapled photo paper-clipped inside the folder. It was blurry, grainy surveillance footage from the bust. But in one corner, behind the cages, there was a collapsed wire crate, and inside it, barely visible, a young dog no bigger than a duffel bag, with eyes too old for his face. "That's Echo?" Malik asked. His voice caught him off guard. First full sentence in weeks. Carr nodded slowly. "That was over a year ago." She opened another folder. "And this I found strange. A clinic intake sheet from 6 years prior. A routine dental file. It listed the owner as Denise Brown, Malik's mother. The dog, Memphis. The breed, coloring, and ID match. The photo was unmistakable, and there, scribbled in faded black pen along the margin. Sired 3 pups before neutering. One of the offspring had been adopted by a police training unit, but there were no details beyond that." "That's impossible," Malik whispered. But it wasn't. The ears, the muzzle, the intensity. Echo wasn't just some stray pulled from a fight ring. He was Memphis's blood, Malik's blood. He looked up, suddenly aware of the silent pressure in his chest. Echo had moved closer again, sitting not 2 feet away, his body loose, tail swaying gently. Carr lowered the folder. "You didn't just calm him," she said quietly. "You activated something." The air grew heavy between them, not fearful. Malik couldn't remember the last time someone used the word activated about him. He had once been someone who brought dogs alive, who spoke to them in ways that went deeper than commands. But that boy had been buried beneath metal screws and rehab brochures. Until now. "Let me work with him," Malik said, voice low but firm. "Not a program, just..." "He's not cleared for off-leash. He's flagged red in the system. One incident and he dies anyway," Malik interrupted. "Let me show you who he really is." Echo stood up, not in alarm, in alignment, as if waiting for Carr to say yes. She didn't speak, just nodded once, slowly. Malik gave a small, resolute push of his wheels forward, and Echo followed. Each step precise but unforced. From behind the glass, the trainers whispered, unsure whether to be terrified or awestruck. But Malik wasn't listening anymore. His world had narrowed to the rhythm of Echo's paws against the concrete, and the old warmth crawling back into his chest. He didn't know where this path led. He only knew they were already walking it together. By the end of the 3rd week, it was undeniable Echo had become a different dog. But only around one person. Malik didn't perform miracles. He didn't wave treats or clickers or flash hand signals like the others. He simply showed up each morning, wheeled himself into the enclosure, and spoke to Echo in a quiet, unhurried tone, the way someone might greet an old friend they hadn't seen in years but never stopped loving. The staff tried to understand it. Some chalked it up to sheer luck, others called it trauma bonding. A few, less generous, whispered about manipulation, but no one could deny what they saw. Echo didn't respond to anyone else. Not the senior trainers with years of behavioral experience. Not the volunteers with soft voices and liver treats. Not even the department supervisor, who once commanded military K-9s overseas. When they tried to lead Echo, he froze. When they issued commands, he turned his head, unmoved. When they raised their voice, he growled not with rage but with warning. But when Malik spoke, Echo listened. He obeyed, he even wagged his tail. Dr. Carr had no choice but to document it. Every session, every behavior, every success and refusal. Her records painted a portrait that was both compelling and inconvenient. Malik, a 17-year-old in a wheelchair with no formal training since his accident, had become the sole behavioral conduit for a dog once destined for lethal injection. That wasn't something the center could ignore or explain. So the board called a meeting. They sat in a stuffy conference room one Friday afternoon, flanked by stacks of files and incident reports. A projector played muted footage of Malik and Echo during their sessions. One clip showed Malik whispering, Echo gently nudging his leg. Another showed the dog lying beside the chair, head resting across Malik's footplate, completely still. "What are we seeing here?" one committee member asked, squinting at the grainy screen. "Is this a trick? Is the dog medicated?" "Absolutely not," Dr. Carr answered firmly. "Except this kid." "It's precisely the issue," another board member interjected. "It's a public safety risk. We can't base an entire rehabilitation plan on one teenager's influence. What if he stops showing up? What if the dog regresses?" "He's already regressed," Dr. Carr said. "He was on the kill list." Malik pulled him back. The room fell silent. Then someone added, "We need to test it independently. Remove Malik from the picture, observe the dog's behavior." And so, without warning, they did. The next Monday, Malik arrived to an empty yard and a clipped message at the front desk. "Session suspended for reassessment." No explanation. No appeal. Malik's jaw clenched as he stared down the hallway toward the kennels, heart pounding in a rhythm of confusion and dread. Meanwhile, in a controlled enclosure behind the main facility, Echo waited. Trainers entered, 2 at a time, armed with familiar tools, clickers, leashes, reward pouches. They approached slowly, cautiously, rehearsing every step. Echo didn't lunge, he didn't bark, he didn't growl, he just stood there motionless, silent. They offered food, he didn't eat. They gave basic commands, he didn't flinch. They tried gentle coaxing, nothing. His breathing remained even. His eyes drifted toward the gate, the wall, then the corner where Malik's chair usually parked. The trainers exchanged glances. One of them, a grizzled handler named Felix, muttered under his breath, "He's looking for him." The cameras recorded everything, hour after hour. No progress, no engagement. The behavior logs grew repetitive. No response, no eye contact, refused food, whined briefly when door opened. On day 3 of Malik's suspension, a local reporter caught wind of the story through a leak in the staff. The headline hit the regional newsfeed before lunch. Expert skeptical. It spread fast. The article painted Malik as a well-meaning but possibly delusional figure, implying the center was indulging sentiment over science. Miracle or myth? One station asked. Social media split down the middle. Supporters rallied with hashtags like "Let Malik Work" and "Echo Effect." Critics flooded the center's pages demanding safety audits. Malik didn't respond to any of it. He sat in his room, the TV off, his phone silent. The staff was demoralized, the board pressured. They allowed one final session, strictly monitored, recorded with full observation. Malik rolled in just past 9 a.m. The yard was quiet, save for the drone of the facility lights and the soft patter of dew evaporating on concrete. Echo was already inside. His ears pricked at the sound of the chair's wheels. Then he turned. His whole body shifted. The tail moved first, then the paws, then his chest rose with something that almost looked like a sigh. Malik crossed the threshold. "Hey buddy," he said softly. Echo bounded forward, not aggressively, not carelessly, but with purpose. He stopped 2 feet away and sat, head tilted. Cameras clicked from all directions. In the control room, someone whispered, "Well, I'll be damned." Dr. Carr leaned forward, watching every frame. Malik extended his hand. "He's okay now," he said. "I'm here." Echo pressed his nose into Malik's palm and exhaled. The trainers stared. Felix slowly lowered his clipboard. "You think he knew we were watching?" he muttered. "He didn't care." Carr replied, "He was waiting." The evaluation continued for another 30 minutes, but there was no point. The footage would speak for itself. Commands were given. Echo obeyed, even improvised ones. When Malik rolled backward and whispered, "Let's go home," Echo turned and followed without cue. By afternoon, the story had flipped. The same outlet that questioned Malik's credibility now ran a new headline. "Echo only listens to teen handler expert surprised." Support poured in. Former canine handlers, animal psychologists, even trauma therapists commented online about the possibility of mirrored healing. Malik, for his part, didn't read the comments. He only cared about one thing. Echo ate a full bowl of food that evening for the first time in 4 days. The next morning, Malik returned early. Carr was waiting by the gate, her arms folded. No clipboard this time. "They're not sure what to do with him now," she said. "But they know one thing. He doesn't belong in isolation anymore." Malik nodded. "Let me take him further," he said. "No pressure, just—" Malik whispered something no one else could hear. Echo responded with a low, steady whine, a sound not of stress but of readiness. Carr stepped back, her expression unreadable. And then, that week something shifted, not in Echo and not in the center but in Malik. His visits became quieter, more intentional, less about proving anything to anyone, and more about rediscovering pieces of himself buried under metal rods and quiet grief. Every morning he wheeled into the yard before the sun had cleared the trees, and every morning Echo was already waiting. They didn't do drills. Not in the traditional sense. Malik would speak, Echo would move, then rest, then move again. Their rhythm wasn't mechanical, it was musical. One morning, while the dew still clung to the chain-link fence like tiny stars, Malik sat in the middle of the yard, Echo at his side. The center was empty except for Dr. Carr, who stood quietly behind the glass wall, sipping her coffee and reverence. Malik stared straight ahead, eyes unfocused. Box left, he said softly, almost without thinking. It was a phrase from another lifetime. A command he had used with Memphis years ago during their first agility competitions, back when he still had braces and unshakable dreams. It wasn't part of any standardized system, just a nickname they'd come up with. Box left to cue a tight pivot and return maneuver. Echo's ears perked instantly. Then, without hesitation, he turned in a tight arc, crossed behind Malik's chair, and sat precisely at his left heel, his chest aligned with the front wheel as if pulled there by memory. Malik blinked. The command had been extinct, buried beneath therapy appointments and pity. He hadn't said it out loud in years. Box right, he whispered, testing fate. Echo responded again, circling to the opposite side and settling like a ghost retracing old choreography. Dr. Carr's coffee cup trembled slightly in her hand. Her eyes locked on the pair, unblinking, looked down at Echo, who now sat calmly, breathing in rhythm with him. "How do you know that?" he murmured. The dog tilted his head, as if to say, "Because you taught me." That same afternoon, a man walked into the center wearing a sheriff's badge and a disapproving scowl. He moved with the kind of stiff authority that made people step aside instinctively. Sheriff Ronald Clay, the elected head of county law enforcement for over 15 years, was not known for sentiment. He had come at the request of the board to review Echo's case personally. The sheriff had a history with the center. He'd approved funding for their expansion 5 years ago, but he'd also pushed to enforce tighter euthanasia protocols for high-risk rescues. Echo had been on his original red list. Now, this same dog was on the verge of being declared a success story. Clay didn't like that. "I need to see the animal in action," he said curtly, hands folded behind his back. Carr led him to the observation deck above the yard, where Malik and Echo had just begun their afternoon session. "That the kid?" Clay asked, nodding toward Malik. "Yes," Carr replied. "His name's Malik Brown." The sheriff narrowed his eyes. "Brown, Malik Brown, from the Ridgeview Middle Appeal?" Carr hesitated. "That's him," Clay grunted. "Figures, thought I recognized the name. I denied a mentorship application he submitted years ago. Said he wanted to join the junior canine program. Didn't feel like the right fit." "Why?" Carr asked. Her tone neutral but sharp. Clay shrugged. "Didn't like his attitude, thought he was too—" Carr didn't respond. Her gaze returned to the yard. Malik was working with Echo again, this time guiding the dog through a wide circle around several cones, using only eye contact and short clicks of his tongue. "Impressive," Clay admitted reluctantly. "But it's not sustainable. That boy's not certified. That dog's still flagged dangerous." "What happens when something snaps?" Carr said. "He doesn't snap, he listens. To Malik, only Malik. And when Malik's gone," Clay snapped, "you building a career around a teenager who might go to college next year." Carr took a slow breath. "We're building trust. Something you didn't give him when he applied at 12. Clay's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Down below, Malik leaned in and whispered something to Echo. The dog barked once, not loud, not sharp, just acknowledgement, a signal. Lay down at Malik's feet, still, waiting. "Let me talk to the kid," Clay said. Carr hesitated, then nodded once and stepped away. A few minutes later, Malik found himself sitting in the administrative wing. Echo curled at his feet like a sentry. Sheriff Clay entered without ceremony and sat across from him. The air felt colder instantly. "So," Clay began, "you and that mutt think you're smarter than the whole system?" Malik didn't flinch. "No, sir." "Then explain this." Clay gestured vaguely. Everyone says that dog should be dead. 2 months ago he was flagged as unrecoverable, and now he's tap dancing for you like you raised him." Malik's voice was calm. "I didn't raise him, but I recognize him." Clay scoffed. "Spare me the poetry, what's the trick?" "There's no trick," Malik said. "Just time and trust." Clay leaned back. "You know I turned down your mentorship app when you were younger." "I know," Malik replied, voice steady. "You said I didn't fit the image of the program." "You didn't," Clay snapped. "We had protocols. You wanted to write your own. That's not how law enforcement works." "Is how dogs work," Malik said quietly. "Echo doesn't follow rules, he follows connection." "That's dangerous," Clay muttered. "That's honest," Malik corrected. Echo looked up briefly, then rested his chin back on Malik's foot. "You're not scared of him?" Clay asked. "No," Malik said. "He's more scared of being alone than I am of getting hurt." That shut the sheriff up. For a while neither spoke. The clock ticked quietly behind them. Finally, Clay stood. "I'll file a neutral report," he said. "Doesn't mean I approve, but I'm not blind either." Malik nodded once. As Clay turned to leave, he paused at the door. "You still using those made-up commands?" "Sometimes," Malik said. "They're not made up to him," Clay grunted, then walked out. Malik sat in silence for a long while after. Echo shifted slightly, pressing his side against Malik's leg. There was warmth there, real, grounding warmth. Not applause, not victory, just weight and presence. When Carr re-entered, she said nothing at first. Then she handed Malik a clipboard. "Board wants a long-term proposal," she said. "You're officially on record as Echo's primary handler." Malik blinked. "They're letting me?" "They're watching you," she clarified. "But yes, you're in." The email came on a Thursday morning, unread and unnoticed until Malik's mother gently placed her hand on his shoulder and said, "You've been selected." He looked up from the kitchen table, confused. She slid her phone in front of him. On the screen was an official message from the Southgate Center's Community Outreach Department, welcoming Malik Brown to the Adaptive Handler Pilot Program, a public-facing initiative pairing exceptional handlers with therapeutic canines for live demonstration and educational showcases. Malik read it twice, then turned slowly toward her. "You submitted my name?" he asked, voice low. Denise didn't flinch. "You did," she said simply. "You don't get to hide forever." Malik stared at the screen, his breath shallow. He wasn't angry. Not really. He was scared. "You know what this means, right?" he whispered. "People watching, people judging. I'm not." "You're not broken," she said firmly. "You're just..." He couldn't. Later that evening, he sat in the center's west yard with Echo lying beside him, head resting on the top of Malik's footplate. The staff was already preparing the space for Saturday's open house, a community event drawing dozens of donors, volunteers, and even regional media. Malik had seen the flyers. His name was on them, featuring Malik Brown and Echo, a story of trust and transformation. He hated it, not the words, not the idea, but the weight of it. He didn't want to be anyone's symbol. He didn't want to inspire. He just wanted silence and echo. But that wasn't an option anymore. On Saturday, the center buzzed with movement. Canopies lined the courtyard. Kids ran between agility sets. Donors mingled with trainers and staff. And in the middle of it all, Malik sat quietly in his chair beside the main demo ring, Echo seated perfectly at his left. A microphone had been clipped to Malik's collar, though he hadn't agreed to speak. A staff member checked the sound, offered a thumbs up. Malik gave no reaction. Then the music started, soft, instrumental, neutral. An announcer's voice crackled over the speaker system. "And now, one of our newest adaptive pairs, Malik Brown and Echo." The applause was tentative at first, then louder. Malik's hands twitched slightly. Echo stood. Together they entered the ring. The world blurred, faces blurred. All he could see was the outline of Echo beside him, ears alert, stride calm. Malik had prepared a simple routine, basic movements, directional cues, a few position changes. Nothing flashy, nothing to test faith. But halfway through, as Echo stood before him, poised and focused, Malik heard himself whisper, "Upright." It wasn't in the plan, it wasn't a command Echo had learned at Southgate. It was something Malik and Memphis had once practiced during balance work, guiding the dog to press gently against his side to help him stabilize posture. Echo didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and leaned softly against Malik's right arm. The warmth of his body spread instantly, grounding. Malik's core tightened. Then, without fully knowing how or why, he shifted his hands to his lap and pushed down. Echo adjusted, counterbalanced, pressed with the right pressure. Malik sat upright, no slouch, no slump, straight, centered. He heard the crowd gasp, but it sounded far away. His back trembled, his arms shook, his lungs held the air hostage. And then, something inside him cracked. Not bone, not pain, something deeper. The tears came without permission. For the first time since the accident, Malik Brown cried. Not from weakness, not from fear, but from recognition. His body remembered something. His soul remembered something. The audience fell silent. Even the children stopped moving. For a full 10 seconds, no one breathed. Malik covered his mouth with one hand, the other resting gently on Echo's back. The dog didn't move, didn't shift, just stayed anchored. Carr, standing just beyond the gate, whispered, "Holy shit." The rest of the routine blurred by. Malik finished it, somehow, returning to center and signaling Echo to sit. The applause came again, this time thunderous. But Malik didn't hear it. He sat still, spine straighter than it had been in 18 months, breathing like he'd just run uphill. After the event, reporters approached. Photographers snapped pictures. One even knelt and tried to interview him. Malik said nothing. He only nodded once, then wheeled himself out of the ring and toward the kennel wing. Echo followed, calm as ever. Inside, Carr caught up with him near the supply station. "You okay?" she asked, genuine for once, without her usual clinical reserve. Malik looked at her, eyes raw. He held nothing saw. They stood in silence for a while. Then she added, "There's a reason he knew that cue." "Memphis," Malik said. "I know." Carr bit her lip. "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" Malik didn't answer. He turned back toward the hallway. At the far end, through the window of the staff office, he saw a printed copy of the event flyer taped to the door. His name. Echo's name. The center's logo. A quote underneath, "Healing doesn't always walk on two legs." He stared at it for a moment, then whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "Neither does strength." That night at home, Denise sat beside him on the couch. They didn't speak much. She just rested a hand lightly on his back. On the TV, news coverage of the event played on low volume. The camera zoomed in on the moment Malik rose upright, Echo bracing beside him. The anchor's voice, gentle with awe, spoke over the image. For one young man and one forgotten dog, this wasn't just a trick, it was a testimony. Malik clicked the remote off. "I didn't ask for this," he muttered. Denise nodded. "No, but maybe you're meant to carry it anyway." He looked down at Echo, curled beside the couch. The dog lifted his head, ears perked, eyes soft. "You knew, didn't you?" Malik whispered. Echo blinked slowly, then lowered his head onto Malik's foot. That night, Malik stayed late at the center, far later than anyone else. The aftershock of the showcase still hummed in his chest, not in the way adrenaline did, but deeper, like a pulse reawakening. He didn't want to go home just yet. Everything at home felt smaller now, like it couldn't hold what had just happened. Carr had allowed him to use the staff lounge, and Echo had been placed back in his secured kennel for the night, per regulation. Malik didn't fight it. He knew the rules. He needed rest anyway, but sleep didn't come. He sat in the dim glow of the lounge, scrolling through the muted TV screen where footage of him and Echo looped every half hour. No matter how many times he watched that moment, Echo pressing gently against him, his back straightening, it never felt real. Around midnight, Malik dozed off in the recliner, his arms crossed, his head tilted to one side. Security footage would later show the clock striking 1:06 a.m. when Echo stood up inside his kennel. Not startled, not restless, just deliberate. He walked to the gate, sniffed at the lock, then, with a series of calculated movements, nudged the latch upward, using his snout and paw. The mechanism, rusted slightly from disuse, gave with a soft click. Echo paused, ears twitching, then stepped out slowly, silently. The hallway cameras caught his silhouette moving toward the staff wing. He didn't bark. He didn't run. He knew where he was going. By 1:11 a.m., Echo was inside the lounge. The door had been left slightly ajar. He walked straight to the recliner, circled once, and lay down against the side of Malik's wheelchair. When the morning staff arrived at 6:30 a.m., they found Malik still asleep, his fingers draped lightly over Echo's back. It was Carr who pulled the security footage and sat through all 5 minutes of it in stunned silence. She didn't call the board. She didn't flag it as a safety breach. Instead, she downloaded the footage, clipped it, and after 3 hours of indecision, uploaded it to the center's official social page with the caption, "When trust chooses you back." Within 12 hours, the clip had over 3 million views. By the end of the week, it had cracked 20 million. Echo's midnight escape and quiet loyalty became a viral sensation, covered by news outlets, therapy networks, and behaviorists. They called it the sleepwalk bond, the guardian dog, the silent pact. But Malik didn't care about the names. He only cared about what it meant. Echo hadn't followed command. He hadn't been coaxed. He had chosen. And that choice changed everything. 2 days later, Malik sat across from Dr. Carr in her office while she sifted through a folder of printed emails. "You've got fans," she said dryly. "From 6 continents apparently, and a few hundred offers to buy Echo." Malik scowled. "He's not for sale." "I know," Carr replied. "I said no to every one." But she handed him a letter, an actual envelope, handwritten. No return email, just a name. Mariah Jennings from Athens, Georgia. Malik opened it slowly. The handwriting was careful, almost fragile. "Dear Mr. Brown," the letter began. "My name is Mariah. I have a 6-year-old son named Liam. He is on the autism spectrum and is completely nonverbal. We've tried dozens of therapies. Nothing has helped him communicate. But last night, when I showed him the video of you and Echo, something happened." He pointed. He smiled. And for the first time in his life, he said a word. He said, "Dog." Malik's hands trembled slightly as he read. "He now asks to watch your video every morning. He taps the screen and says, 'I don't know if this is possible, but if there's any way my son could meet Echo, even for a few minutes, please. I'll drive anywhere. I'll sign anything. Just, please.'" Malik read the letter twice, then placed it carefully on Carr's desk. "We're doing it," he said. Carr didn't hesitate. "Already cleared with legal. They'll be here Friday." When Friday came, the center felt different. It was quieter, more sacred. Malik arrived early, Echo already by his side. The staff kept their distance. Everyone knew this wasn't a demonstration. This wasn't about donations or media or policy. This was something else. The Jennings family arrived just after 10 a.m. A young black woman with tired eyes, and a boy who gripped her hand tightly, whose small fingers twitching with nervous energy. Liam didn't speak. He barely looked at anyone, until he saw Echo. The moment their eyes met, something passed between them. Malik recognized the look. It was the same one Echo had given him on that first impossible day. He watched as Echo sat, still and patient. Liam hesitated, then slowly released his mother's hand and walked forward. 1 step, 2, 5, then he was standing in front of Echo, eyes wide, lips parted. He reached out and touched the dog's ear. Echo didn't move. Liam whispered almost inaudibly, "Dog." Mariah gasped. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Malik felt his own throat tighten. Liam sat down. Echo laid his head on the boy's lap. They stayed that way for 20 minutes. No one interrupted. No one dared. Malik turned to Carr, who stood beside the door, her arms crossed tight against her chest. "He didn't know he could do that," he whispered. Carr's voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. "Neither did I." Later, as the Jennings prepared to leave, Liam walked back toward Malik's chair, Echo beside him. Malik knelt slightly forward. "He's yours today," he said gently. Liam looked up, unsure what that meant. Malik nodded toward Echo. "He wanted to meet you, and you showed him who you are." Liam reached out and touched Malik's hand, then turned and whispered something only Echo seemed to hear. The dog barked once, soft and light, then nuzzled the boy's side. Mariah mouthed a thank you so full of weight it nearly knocked Malik over. As they left, Malik remained by the window, watching the boy climb into the car, Echo's scent still lingering in the hallway. Carr walked up beside him. "What do you think he said?" she asked. Malik looked down at his hands, then at the paw prints fading on the tile floor. "Maybe the same thing I did," he said. "Don't leave." It started with a phone left recording on a bench. One of the interns had forgotten it during cleanup after Liam's visit. The device had been propped upright, camera angled slightly downward, but it captured everything. For almost 8 minutes, Malik and Echo moved inside the training yard with a fluidity that didn't need narration. There were no spoken commands, no gestures, no leash. Just proximity, rhythm, and the invisible current flowing between them. Echo mirrored Malik's turns without cues, pivoted with him around cones, circled back with precision, then slowed to a halt every time Malik stopped his wheels. The footage had no background music, just wind, leaves, breath. A moment of stillness at the end showed Malik reaching down, brushing his fingers along Echo's shoulder, and mouthing something, 2 words. Echo responded with a low, soft bark, barely audible, as if only meant. By the time the intern retrieved her phone, the video had already auto-backed up to her cloud. Out of instinct more than intention, she clipped the cleanest parts and posted it to her personal account with the caption, "No words, just trust. The silent command." It hit 5 million views in 2 days, 10 million by the end of the week. News anchors replayed the clip as part of uplifting moments segments. Behaviorists dissected it on podcasts. The term silent command became a trending topic worldwide. Schools reached out. Therapy networks requested appearances. Even a defense training symposium extended an invite to Malik to speak on emotional imprinting between canine and handler. Malik didn't respond to most requests. He didn't care for lights or press or being turned into someone else's symbol. But he understood why the world watched, because deep down, people didn't just want miracles. They wanted proof that healing didn't need noise. Meanwhile, the center's inbox flooded, but one email stood out, forwarded directly to Dr. Carr's personal account, flagged as urgent by a department contact in Atlanta Fire and Rescue. The subject line read, "I know that dog." Echo standing beside Malik at full attention, head high, eyes sharp. The body of the message was from a fireman named Paul Rivas. He claimed to have responded to a kennel blaze in an unregistered dog training compound outside Augusta, almost 2 years prior. The fire had gutted most of the structure. Dozens of animals had perished, but one had survived, dragging a toddler from the flames before emergency responders arrived. Paul wrote that he remembered the dog because of its eyes. Not wild, he typed, but old. Like he'd seen too much and still chose to help. They never identified the dog. It bolted once sirens came, vanishing into the nearby woods before anyone could tag or scan it. The only reason the incident was even documented was because body cam footage from another responder caught a glimpse of the shepherd disappearing through the smoke. "It's him," Paul wrote. "I know it's him. That's your dog. That's Echo." Carr didn't sleep that night. She reviewed archived footage from the Augusta fire. Grainy, smoky, choppy from frame skips, but there it was. A German shepherd pulling a small child from under a fallen beam, gripping the child's coat by the hood and dragging backward across embers. There was a white patch on the dog's chest then, since singed away in later medical reports. But the eyes, those eyes, she brought the evidence to Malik show were distortions. He sat quietly as she explained, flipping through each printed image. He ran into a fire to save a child. He said, he was never trained for that. No one told him to, he just did it. Malik stared at the paper, friendships brushing the edge of the photo. "No leash," he murmured. "No command," Carr nodded. "Just instinct." Malik looked down at Echo, who now lay at his feet calm and steady. "Why wouldn't he tell anyone?" Carr smiled faintly. "Maybe he didn't think it mattered. Or maybe he was just waiting for someone who saw him for who he really is." Malik's chest tightened. Echo, the dog deemed too violent to keep alive, had once risked his life for a stranger. It wasn't just about training, it was about choice. The story, once verified, went public within days. The original firefighter, Paul Rivas, appeared on a local morning segment with tears in his eyes. "I thought we lost that dog in the fire," he said, his voice cracking. "Turns out, he just kept saving people." The footage of Echo dragging the child played side by side with the silent command film. The dog, Malik, watched it unfold, not with pride but with a solemn kind of awe. He hadn't saved Echo. Echo had saved himself again and again, and now, through him, others. The inbox filled with messages from burn survivors, special needs families, trauma counselors, veterans with PTSD. All of them asking, wondering, hoping, Can we meet him? Can he meet us? Can he help someone we love? But he answered every message. That Sunday, during a closed session before the center reopened for the week, Malik entered the yard with Echo at his side. Carr waited by the fence, arms crossed, clipboard forgotten. Malik didn't speak. He simply opened his hand and made no movement. Echo sat. He leaned in. Then, slowly, Malik placed both hands on his knees, took a breath, and whispered, "Heal." Echo moved in perfect sync beside him. They walked once around the perimeter, then returned to the center of the ring. Malik turned to Carr. "We need to build something," he said. "Not for shows, for the ones who don't have words." Carr nodded. "Like Liam, like Echo," Malik said. Outside the center's gate, news crews waited again. But Malik didn't walk to them. He stood beside Echo and whispered something the cameras couldn't hear. And once more, the dog answered, not with tricks but with presence. And still, the world leaned in closer. The invitation came in a sleek white envelope sealed with gold foil. The kind of presentation that screamed prestige and formality. Malik didn't open it for 2 full days. It sat untouched on the corner of the table in Dr. Carr's office, until she finally pushed it toward him during their morning debrief. "It's real," she said. "They're asking you and Echo to open the National Freestyle Companion Show. That's not a local fair gig, Malik, that's prime time." He didn't look at the envelope. "It's not for me," he said. "I don't do arenas. I don't do crowds." "You've done all of that already," Carr reminded him gently. "Every time you step into this yard, the world watches." Malik shook his head. "That's different. Here, I know the rules, I know the ground." Carr's voice dropped lower. "So does Echo." He didn't respond. That night, Echo skipped dinner. At first, Malik assumed it was stress or heat. But by the second day, the untouched bowl remained, and Echo had taken to pacing outside the window of Malik's usual practice room. By the third day, Carr stepped into the lounge holding Echo's bowl in one hand and a clipboard in the other. 3 days, Malik, she said, not a bite, not even water. He's not sick. Vitals are perfect. But something's wrong. Malik looked at Echo, who lay curled on the floor with his back to them. Eyes open but distant. "He knows," Carr said. "He heard you turn it down." Malik's stomach twisted. He wheeled himself forward, stopping beside Echo's body, and lowered his voice. "You want that?" Echo didn't move. "You want the lights, the crowd, silence, because I don't." Echo lifted his head slowly, deliberately, then stood and placed his chin on Malik's lap. Not a plea, not a trick, just a weight that said yes. The Freestyle Companion Show was held in a domed stadium outside Charlotte, North Carolina, an arena built for thousands. Every inch of it broadcast Echo with camera rigs, press booths, and velvet floors. When Malik arrived with Echo 2 days before the performance, a ripple spread through the competitor camp. No wheelchair handler had ever been on that field. Ever. Some whispered with curiosity, some frowned in skepticism. Others smiled, but only with their mouths. Echo remained calm the entire time, never barking, never pulling, just watching, always watching. During the orientation, organizers offered Malik an adapted routine suggestion: shortened time, alternative ramps, pre-recorded cues. Malik declined. "We won't need any of that," he said quietly. "We're not doing a routine. This is a freestyle event." Malik nodded. "Exactly." The night of the showcase, the arena lights dimmed and the announcer's voice filled the stadium. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special opening pair, the duo that has redefined the meaning of companionship, Malik Brown and Echo." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras panned to Malik as he rolled calmly into the center of the ring, Echo at his side, leash draped loose. He wore no costume. Echo had no accessories. No upbeat music played, just ambient tones, soft and slow. Then, the spotlight dimmed further. For 60 seconds, nothing happened. Malik sat still, Echo stood beside him. No commands, no choreography, just breath. Then Malik moved forward slowly, one wheel rotation at a time. Echo walked beside him, step for step, never ahead, never behind. They made a circle once, then again. On the third pass, Malik whispered just barely above silence. "With me." Echo responded not with a spin or a leap or a bow, but with presence. He matched Malik's speed. He adjusted when the chair tilted slightly. He kept his body inches away at all times. The crowd, expecting flips or music-amped motions, fell into an eerie hush. A murmur swept through the stands. The judges looked at each other. One leaned toward the mic to speak but stopped, because something was happening. The more Malik moved, the more Echo mirrored, not in commands but in understanding. Every pause, every turn, every glance, the dog responded as if reading breath, not speech. The silence grew heavy, intimate. Then, Malik stopped in the center. He looked down at Echo, who sat without cue. Slowly, Malik reached out and touched the space behind Echo's ear. "Thank you," he said. The mic didn't catch it, but Echo did. For a heartbeat, the entire stadium held its breath. Then someone began clapping. Soft, hesitant. A child in the front row. Then another and another, until the entire arena erupted. Not in cheers of entertainment, but in awe. The kind of awe reserved for something sacred. The crowd stood. Every judge stood. Some hands less Bowick hand, reaching to pet Echo with quiet reverence. One veteran trainer with over 20 years of titles whispered, "That wasn't a performance, that was prayer." Malik didn't reply. He looked down at Echo, who simply leaned against his leg and closed his eyes, as if finally at rest. In the press booth, reporters scrambled to find the right headline. The quiet act that shook the arena. When a dog chose presence over tricks. Malik and Echo, the companionship that didn't need to perform. Later, as the arena emptied, Malik sat alone on the edge of the ring. Echo curled at his feet. Dr. Carr walked up behind him, her voice soft. "You didn't say a word out there," she said. Malik looked at her. Alex couldn't make out the words on the screen. "Didn't need to." Carr smiled, and yet the whole world listened. In the shadows of the arena's rafters, cameras powered down. The lights dimmed, but deep in the center of that quiet stadium, something had been planted, something that would outlast spotlight, trophies, and applause. Because for the first time in the history of that show, the crowd hadn't cheered for talent. They had cheered for truth. The aftermath of the freestyle companion show should have been triumphant. Social media glowed with praise. News anchors called it a redefining moment in animal therapy history. A national talk show extended a standing invitation. But while the spotlight grew brighter, shadows crawled in just as fast. Within a week, threads appeared across online forums questioning the validity of the performance. A small but vocal group composed mostly of traditional trainers, skeptics, and a few disgruntled competitors began circulating accusations that Malik and Echo's presentation was emotionally manipulative, unverifiable, and undermining the credibility of the sport. Some called it exploitation. Others claimed Echo had been trained offstage with hidden commands. The harshest voices claimed the event was a sympathy grab, arguing that Malik's disability was being used to coerce admiration instead of earning it. The phrase, "pity victory," trended for 2 days. Then came the petition, a self-appointed coalition calling themselves Pureform Performance Integrity, demanded a formal investigation into Echo's eligibility, citing his aggressive background and Malik's lack of formal certification. They argued Echo posed a risk in public settings, and Malik, despite his viral fame, was not a qualified handler, but a symbol placed above safety. The board that once embraced them now hesitated. Carr kept Malik informed, but each update etched deeper lines across his face. "They're not accusing you of anything criminal," she told him carefully one morning. "Just calling your legitimacy into question." Malik didn't answer. Echo sat quietly beside his chair, ears flattened, as if he too could feel the shift in air. 3 days later, Malik shut down his social accounts. He refused every interview. He stopped attending sessions. Even Carr, once his closest ally at the center, found herself at a loss for words when he wheeled past her in silence. At home, Denise did what she always did. Cooked too much, worried too quietly. Malik didn't touch the food. He spent most evenings sitting with Echo on the back porch, watching shadows stretch across the grass like bruises. One night, Denise sat beside him, her voice low. "You knew the world would watch," she said gently. "You just didn't expect it to judge you for standing up." Malik didn't reply. Echo rested his head across Malik's footplate, eyes open, still listening. But the world kept turning, and on the 3rd week of Malik's retreat, a quiet email arrived from a rehabilitation coordinator at Harmony Haven. a small residential center for children with neurological and developmental disorders. The message was simple. We don't want a show, just a visit. There's a girl here named Ellie. She doesn't speak, but she watches Echo every day on YouTube. If you come, we'll be grateful. If not, we understand. Malik didn't answer the email, but the next morning he dressed early, packed a bag of Echo's favorite treats, and loaded the ramp into their van, without a word. Denise drove. She didn't ask questions. Harmony Haven was nestled at the edge of town, surrounded by wild grass and the soft hum of wind chimes. Inside, the halls were bright and quiet. Staff moved gently, voices low. Children played in sensory corners, some clapping, some rocking, others simply staring into space. Malik and Echo were greeted without ceremony. No cameras, no announcements. Just a nurse named Donna with tired eyes and a hopeful smile. Ellie's in the blue room, she whispered. She's particular, doesn't let anyone touch her, doesn't respond to sounds, but she watches Echo's videos for hours. She holds the tablet to her chest and laughs, but no words, never a word. Malik nodded. He wheeled into the room, Echo padding silently behind. Ellie sat alone on a beanbag by the window, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. Her eyes flicked toward them, then back to the window. Malik didn't speak. He just stopped 4 feet away. Echo stood still, no movement, no bark. Slowly, Ellie turned her head again. Her eyes landed on Echo. The stuffed dinosaur dropped from her hands. She blinked, once, twice. Then, without prompting, she stood. No one moved. No one breathed. Echo took a step forward. Ellie didn't flinch. He took another, and another, then stopped, inches from her. She looked at him, really looked. Her hands, small and trembling, reached out and touched his ear. A sound caught in her throat, something soft, almost like a hiccup. Then it formed. Malik's chest tightened so hard it felt like it might shatter. Ellie didn't seem to notice the adults. She was too busy pressing her forehead against Echo's muzzle, repeating the word again and again. Dog, dog, dog. Echo didn't move, didn't blink. He simply leaned into her, absorbing her small weight with the patience of something ancient. Malik turned toward the doorway, unable to hold them. Denise was already there, her hand pressed to her mouth, eyes shining. You brought him here, she whispered. Malik shook his head. No, he said. Brought me. Word of the visit didn't go viral. There were no reporters, no flashy headlines. Just a quiet photo taken by Donna. Echo curled beside Ellie on the beanbag, her hand resting lightly on his neck. Malik in the background, not watching the camera but watching the two of them. When Carr received the photo, she didn't forward it. She printed it and pinned it to her office wall beneath a note that simply read, "Let them talk, he's still listening." That evening, as Malik and Echo sat together on the porch once more, the sky painted in fading orange, Denise stepped outside holding the mail. There's another envelope, she said, same as before. Malik took it. Inside was a letter, not an invitation but a thank you. Handwritten, from Ellie's mother. It ended with 4 words. You changed her world. Malik folded the paper and placed it beside him. Echo nudged his arm, then rested his head on Malik's shoulder. You heard that? Malik asked softly. Echo blinked slowly. Malik smiled, the first in weeks. The charity gala was held in the grand rotunda of the Westside Civic Hall, a place lined with polished marble floors and banners stitched with gold leaf. Dozens of community leaders gathered beneath warm lights and murmuring chandeliers. The event was organized to raise funds for therapeutic programs for at-risk youth and special needs children programs, now modeled after what Echo and Malik had quietly begun to represent. Carr stood at the registration table, clipboard in hand, giving last-minute instructions to volunteers and scanning the growing crowd. Malik arrived quietly, wheeled through the side entrance to avoid the cluster of cameras at the front. Echo followed close, wearing no vest, no medallion, just himself. Calm, steady, eyes alert. Malik wore a plain black jacket over a navy button-down, hands trembling only slightly as they moved over his lap. It wasn't the lights that made him nervous. It was the moment he knew was coming. He hadn't agreed to speak at first. The invitation to the gala had included his name in the program with the title Keynote Reflection. He'd almost declined entirely, But something about Ellie's voice still echoed in his mind. Something about the way Echo had sat beside her, like passing a flame without burning. Carr had said, maybe it's not about saying something new. Maybe it's just about being seen again. And so Malik came. He watched as the evening unfolded. Speeches, pledges, laughter. Videos played highlight reels of Echo, slow magna clips of their silent command, interviews from families Echo had helped. None of it felt real, until they said his name. The MC stepped aside and welcomed Malik Brown to the stage. A spotlight swept across the room and landed on him. The applause began gently, then swelled. People stood, some clapped, some just smiled, hands to hearts. Malik felt Echo's body tense slightly beside him, not anxious, just ready. He wheeled toward the ramp, slowly, each push of the wheel steadier than the last. As he reached the podium, the noise settled. Malik didn't begin with words. He sat, quiet. Echo stood beside him. The hall hushed again. Then, Malik placed both palms on the armrests. He didn't rush. He didn't breathe too hard. Just Echo didn't move. Just watched as if sensing the storm behind Malik's eyes. Then Malik stood. No brace, no lift. Just one leg, one moment, one choice. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't scream. Because the silence said more. In that breathless room, people could feel something ancient rise. Not the power of recovery, not even strength, but the presence of something breaking free. Malik gripped the podium only lightly. His left leg trembled under the strain, but it held. Then Echo moved. With reverence, he stepped forward and placed one paw gently on Malik's foot, as if anchoring him, then bowed his head, not in submission, but in communion. The entire hall froze, and in the stillness, Malik's voice broke through low, raw, unpolished. "You're not an echo of who I used to be," he said, eyes locked on Echo. "You're the voice calling me back to the part I forgot I had." His breath caught, but he didn't stop. "You call it healing. They call it training. But really, it's just remembering. Remembering what it means to trust something so deeply. You begin to trust yourself again." Echo blinked slowly, still holding Malik's foot under his paw. The camera lights dimmed. No one moved. One child in the front row whispered. He stood, and her father simply nodded, tears streaking down his cheeks. Malik turned his gaze to the crowd. "This," he gestured to Echo, to his body, to the moment. "This isn't about defying odds. It's about reclaiming silence." Someone clapped once, and then the flood came. Not like a tidal wave, but like the sun rising after a long storm. Slow, golden, undeniable. The applause grew from a hush to a roar, and yet through it all, Malik didn't move. He stayed there, upright, with Echo at his side, as if time had paused for the world to understand what had just unfolded. Later, backstage, Carr found him sitting again, exhausted but glowing. "You didn't need to say anything," she whispered. Malik looked down at Echo, who now lay across his shoes, eyes closed in peace. "I said everything I needed to," he replied. That night, the video of his speech swept across the internet, but no one remembered his exact words. What they remembered was the way Echo touched her foot, the way Malik stood not to impress but to become whole, the way silence became sacred again. And in homes around the country, children whispered to their parents, asking if they could meet the dog who taught a boy to stand again. If this story moved you even a little, consider liking and subscribing to stay with us on the next journey. What part hit you the hardest? Was it the silent command? Or when Malik stood for the first time? And where are you watching from? Drop a comment, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.